we didn't really set out to make a Western on page one or day one of writing this movie. But then as we kept going, it was more and more of a true Western, and we tried to just run with it.
From the Autry Museum, located on Tongva Homelands in Los Angeles, California, join us in asking, what is a Western? My name is Josh Garrett-Davis. I'm one of the curators at the Autry Museum of the American West, and thank you for joining us for a conversation with Conor Allyn and Jake Allyn, the director and writer star of No Man's Land. I think a lot of you watching will have already seen this film and streamed it. For those who haven't, definitely take the opportunity to. It's a story of some people who get kind of pulled into a lot of tragedy and drama as a result of living kind of in the borderlands, the Texas Mexico border. Jake plays the main character, Jackson Greer, who is pulled into that drama, but several other characters are as well. It speaks to a lot of issues, but it's also a very human individual story of these individual characters. I just wanted to start out by asking you guys, how long have you been working on this project? How did you? I think it's your second film you've made together as a feature. How long have you been working on this one, and how did it get started?
This is Jake here. First of all, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation here. We started writing the movie about 7 years ago, but it was something that's kind of been a story that's kind of been close to our hearts really since childhood. We grew up in Texas, but our dad worked a lot in Mexico while we were growing up, and so we would get to go on business trips with him. And it really just allowed us to see a different Mexico than a lot of our friends did and a lot of U.S. citizens get to see, period. And so we got into the film business. We knew it was kind of a world that we wanted to dive into and hopefully, shed some enlightenment on.
And we've been making home movies together since we were kids, in our backyards. And I think the very, very genesis of this idea was right when the Minutemen of Arizona were starting to show up in the news. The Minutemen, who were sort of these ranchers or people living right on the border who, were arming themselves and without badges and just sort of basically saying, government, you're not doing a good enough job protecting our borders. We're going to go do it ourselves. And just thought that was like really sort of interesting, scary narrative that was happening. And we sort of kind of double clicked on that. And it, very touched our past and stuff, and that was sort of the beginning of the idea of what eventually became this movie.
And films are so collaborative, and I feel like this one is such a perfect example, because if you asked me where the genesis came from, it would be from the topic you wanted to talk about later, which is Mark Twain and Huck Finn and travel movies. And Jack London and Mark Twain were like the only writers that anybody could ever get me to read as a kid. I did not like to read. Like, I wanted to be outside playing baseball. But if I had to read, like, I would read one of those too. And so I always wanted to tell a road movie. And then Conor was really fascinated by what you were just talking about with Arizona ranchers and stuff. And so it was like, okay, how do we find a way into both,
That's great. Well, yeah, let's go to that, because there's a scene in the movie kind of where Jackson on a bus in Mexico meets an English teacher who's reading Huck Finn to her son. Tell me about specifically, because much of the movie is a sort of voyage down the river, so to speak, for Jackson. How did that play a role in your writing process, and why did you want to kind of give it a shout out in some ways, or I don't know if that was the
I think we did want to kind of just pay homage and pay a little tribute. I don't think I was trying to trick anyone into thinking that I hadn't been inspired by that. And I think with Westerns there's like a bit of poetry, I hope, to Westerns. And so I think it allows you to get away with stuff like that. And it's such a quintessentially American, piece of literature. And, I was also kind of really captivated by this kid Huck at the beginning of the movie has some very kind of ingrained feelings about race, and mostly not because he's a racist, but because of the way he was born and raised and the surroundings of his life. And so I thought we could do a very similar thing with Jackson, except about his relationship with Latin culture.
There's like a moment where he just says, Mexico is not what I thought, or something like, or it's not the way I thought it was, or something. That seemed to speak for maybe what a lot of, well, probably not what people who just go to Cabo or Yucatan or something see, but if you went to.
No, I mean, there's definitely a reason, that we wanted Jackson, the character, to travel so far south into Mexico, was really to be able to show different aspects of Mexico within itself, as opposed to just like one piece of Mexico. What makes Mexico amazing is that it has so many different flavors and cultures and people within this one country, very similar to the United States, the way that you can go to New Orleans and then drive a couple hours west into Texas and it feels like you're in a different country a bit.
Yeah, and the way Mexico gets, pictured here in the States, whether it's in film, like in a movie like Traffic or something, or Narcos, or the way it's pictured in the news, because the news is going to gravitate towards, probably bad stuff, but it's going to gravitate towards the political nature of the border, immigration, drug trade, whatever. That makes you think like everyone, that Mexico is one dimensional in that way. And those things are all, those are real problems, and we're not trying to minimize those, but it's just more of like a widening of the perspective to include everything.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience growing up or since then in Mexico, just in your lives? Like you've spent a lot of time in different parts of the country, or?
Yeah, I mean, we particularly went the pilgrimage of this movie. The voyage of this movie ends in the city of Guanajuato, in the state of Guanajuato in central Mexico, and our father worked there and in Mexico City mostly in the late 90s, and that was someplace that we traveled to a lot, and spent a lot of time there, lived there, went horseback riding, not to go into the Western stuff too early, but went horseback riding in the agave fields and stuff there, and it was just like powerful memories of our childhood. That
some of our first horseback riding experience actually weren't in Texas, was more in Mexico.
Because in the States you got to go just trail riding, and in Mexico the rules are a little looser, and you can actually go riding for real, and that's kind of what we were after. So you can imagine as small boys, that's
it was pretty exciting.
And about filming there, like, tell me about that process, because you had so many amazing locations, probably, and characters and sort of scenes, from kind of a like young hipster bar night type of scene to like a family, an elderly couple, to a church, this cathedral. I mean, tell me about how you kind of came to those scenes and locations and so on.
I think it was really important for us to make the movie as authentic as possible, so that this journey of this kid from Texas, goes through Mexico and experiences the country and grows through it. And so we wanted to make that feel real. And I think that's what audiences nowadays want. They want an authentic experience, especially if it's an experience that takes you out of your own world. So we shot 100% of this movie in Mexico. All the Mexican actors are Mexicans, not Mexican Americans. The only Mexican American actor in the movie is George Lopez, who plays the Mexican American. And we used, except for Jake and I and a couple of other U.S. cast members, all the cast was from Mexico, and all the crew was from Mexico. And there's a very vibrant domestic film industry there. So we had terrific filmmakers, surrounding us and in the crew, that really helped us make a terrific movie. And they understood what we were trying to do and the message that we were trying to tell in this film, and they were very much behind it, and really helped us make what I think is a really good movie that we're very proud of.
Well, you mentioned George Lopez. I wanted to ask about him because I I hadn't thought of him as a dramatic actor. He might have done other dramatic roles. I just haven't seen them, but
He's had
that
a
was,
few, but not, he's not, that's not who's known,
yeah.
he's a comedian.
But he did great. I mean, I was really, I really liked his character. How did you wind up working with him?
He was just, to be honest, he was just the number one guy on our list for that role. We always thought he would be perfect for it. It was also very exciting to us to work with someone who kind of had a past of being involved with this issue and would really be bringing not only an immense amount of enthusiasm for it, but just his own knowledge and experience dealing with the border, immigration, Latinx culture, everything. And he, within a day of him signing on, we were having conversations with him about this issue. He was teaching us about it. I was sending him books about the border and border patrol agents and stuff like that. And he was studying interrogation techniques. I know you guys talked about kind of getting the Texas Ranger right. And it was super, super collaborative.
Yeah, and so you were it sounds like you did a lot of research for the writing and about the
for everything.
issues around the border and so on.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to get it right. I think when you make a movie about, this is a fun movie. It's a Western thriller and stuff, but it is really something we set out to make about something, about an important subject, and we didn't want the film to feel political by any means. We wanted to tell a human story. But if you are going to do something that you're going to do a message in your movie that you feel is important and I think is important, then you really do have to get it right, because if you fail, you're letting people down, and you're missing your opportunity to change minds and touch hearts. And so for us, I think the way we started with that, which is a lot of research and talking to people and trying to get the perspective right from both sides. This movie is a parallel storyline film where we have one Texas family and one Mexican family, and they tragically collide on the border, and then it's sort of the fallout of that on both sides, and then finally these two sides, they're headed towards each other for potentially another tragic collision at the end of the film. And we wanted to be fair to both sides, to try to have a movie that doesn't have like a villain per se, and to be able to find sympathy with all the characters and not just villainize one side or the other.
I sensed like there are these themes, sort of religious themes or kind of spiritual themes about sort of taking in the stranger that comes up, about redemption or atonement or things like that. That I was kind of wondering about that, because especially in that conversation of like moving from these big political issues and complicated policy things that are so much bigger than all these characters' lives, but to that human story, to that what really might touch people.
I mean, I was definitely much more interested in terms of the writing, and even with the research that you were talking about the personal side of it all. I was much more excited, as I'm sure most people are, to read about the real people living in no man's land, or going down to Mexico to work with my co-writer David Barraza in Mexico City, just learning about culture in Mexico and just how important religion often is in Mexican culture. So that was why the Mexican father is so ingrained in that. And I mean, that kind of, hopefully doing the research on the people and then just setting it at the border takes care of itself. We know people are gonna take what they want from the movie, but we were definitely much more interested in researching and just telling a human story.
And on the religious side, I do think Jake and I both we went to Catholic school for a long time when we were kids. I went to Jesuit University, so we had that as in our backgrounds, starting from a very early age. And I think it's hard to tell a story about life and death without at least touching on the morals of religion, and certainly to do a movie about Mexico at all, you're going to have Catholicism has to be a part of it, even even if it's in a small way, which in our film it's in a bigger way. But like it's fundamental. The character, people might not even notice it. It's only one very small shot where you can really tell. But the character of Gustavo, the father of the Mexican boy, he has a tattoo, Jesus Salva, on his fingers, and you can barely, it's something you blink and you could miss it, but hopefully the actor having that, that comes out in his character one way or another, even if you don't see the tattoos.
Since we're the Autry, tell me about Westerns and how you were inspired by Westerns or interested in engaging with the Westerns. I hear periodically of like a director and actor should just be like, I really want to do I've never done a Western. I want to do a Western. How does that play for you?
Genre. I mean, it's like, what an amazing genre. I mean, we love, there's so many
rich, it's a rich thing.
Yeah, it allows you to do this, the poetry of, Westerns, the metaphors of Westerns, I think are terrific. This film, I don't know that we set out initially when we were like, okay, we're going to do a film about the border and about sort of, taking these ideas of like the Minutemen and a reverse immigration story. I think that we really organically came to this idea of making it a Western because of the story. I don't think we set out to make a Western exactly. I mean, we certainly, once we were making the movie, we knew we were making a Western. It just didn't just happen. But I think the story of what's happening, the real story, as our jumping off point, really led us into that world. I mean, this idea of no man's land, which is this, little strip of land in between the wall and the river, where you're in a countryless society, a lawless, by circumstance, then you're in a lawless society. You get this Texas family living, hand to mouth out on the ranch land on the frontier, and they've got what they think might be rustlers in their backyards, and they're scared because of what's happening on the other side of the river. That's, if I didn't give you a time, if I didn't tell you it was 2020, you'd think that's 1880 and it's or 1860 and it's the frontier. And so I think it really naturally lent itself to that story. And then of course we took that and ran with it, and then started to play with it and use those stereotypes and archetypes, but then subvert them and do kind of our own takes on them, which was a lot of fun for us, in the filmmaking, and helped the message of our movie, I think.
In a lot of ways, in the field of Western history, a lot of the historians have moved from like the model of talking about it as the frontier, the 19th century frontier, to talking about the borderlands. Whether they're legally in one country or another, they're influenced by being adjacent to multiple countries or empires or whatever the different time periods.
There's no man's land everywhere,
Yeah, you mentioned there's a dedication to the people of no man's lands around the world. Tell me.
I think we just kind of wanted to remind people that while we wanted to tell what many people will see as a very microscopic story about this one very particular place in I don't know, in Texas or in Mexico, I guess that's our jumping off point for this movie. But I mean, people can feel like, I think George Lopez said it, where like you can feel like you're in no man's land at the grocery store, because he's Mexican American and people think he speaks Spanish, and then he can't really speak all that great of Spanish, and he feels like he's in no man's land. I think right now, with COVID-19 and this pandemic, a lot of people are in their bedroom feeling like they're in no man's land.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually just came upon, I was not sure I was gonna pull this out, but I came upon yesterday, I was just for something else reading this book by a writer from the 80s, Gloria Anzaldúa, who wrote a book called Borderlands, La Frontera. And she had like a poem where she says, to live in the borderlands means to put chile in borscht, and to eat whole wheat tortillas, to speak Tex-Mex with a Brooklyn accent, to be stopped by La Migra. It's kind of interesting. It was right after I had watched the film, so I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Or a Mexican American writer from Texas. So.
And that was written in the 80s.
Yeah, it's from the 1980s. Yeah, so she's she's kind of both poetry and essays about the border, and kind of using that metaphor of the border for it could just be between two people. There's a border between
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
two people,
Just
and
the idea of the other.
yeah,
And, are they other, or are they me?
yeah. Let me pull up a couple questions. Wondering what kind of work your father did that would tell us the types of populations or environments you visited in Mexico.
Yeah, he worked in advertising and political consulting. And the beautiful thing about that is in a political race, he's largely working in the Mexican presidential race for Vicente Fox in the 90s. And, one of the beautiful things about that is in a political race, you're going all around the country. You're going to a lot of different cities. I certainly, thought it was always exciting to go to Mexico City. That was a place that I particularly kind of have memories of going to. And I know you went.
Mexico City was amazing. Guanajuato was amazing, and then spent some time in Chiapas working for a governor there. But it was just like really formative for us to go to. I've been to Cabo and stuff too, but those are nice. But it's just a very different experience to be in Guanajuato. Ciudad Guanajuato is it's a college town. It's like Austin, but you're in like an old Spanish mining town in the mountains. It was built 400 years ago. And Mexico City is one of the biggest, I think actually population wise, I think it might still be the biggest city in the world. It's fabulous and endless. And then Chiapas, which is just completely separate from anything else, was really, really interesting. Seeing old Mayan towns where the people didn't even speak Spanish, and they were still speaking just basically lost languages. They'd had the Zapatista rebellion, I think, just a few years before, and it was a place of a lot of unrest at the time. I was, for a small kid, I don't know that I was taking in everything, but I was taking in a lot, and just it's that widening of perspective that I think people don't always get, but it's a good thing when you do.
Vicente Fox was kind of had a cowboy persona, right?
I'm glad you brought that up. We should have brought that up because he was formative for us.
Yeah.
The
character of Gustavo, the Mexican father in the film, he's 100% inspired, certainly physically, by Vicente Fox. It is one thing that is actually written in the script is, a big, strong, big old mustached Mexican, which a lot of people don't.
And people, you think of someone in Mexico, and you I'm sure you get an idea in your mind of what you think that is. And then someone like Vicente Fox, who in our case you're meeting at like age 13, and he's 6'4", and wears big old cowboy boots, and he's got a ranch, and he actually his grandfather was from Ohio, and he immigrated a long time ago. He immigrated south and moved to Mexico, and then Vicente super well educated and used to work for, I think, Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and he played American football when he was in school. So it's just like it's stereotype breaking for you, and it just makes you think, okay, everything I thought I knew, there's just a lot more to it.
Right. Yeah, there's like for some reason I think I mentioned like the bar scene with the Ninja Turtles named turtle, that just seemed like
that's exactly the kind of stereotype. There's a little bit of fun in that scene and a bit of comedy, but it's like, oh, okay, you thought one thing, and it's a little more to it.
Yeah.
The people you worked with on the film in Mexico, how did they enjoy that sort of, or what was their reference point for like, oh yeah, people always come down and make these Westerns, or what? I don't know.
There were a few, there's so many, there's like historically speaking, like Italy and Mexico, filmed hundreds of Westerns, but most of that was a long time ago. They definitely do I know that there were a couple Westerns that were filmed in Durango where I think we pulled a crew member or two, but not a ton, because there just aren't that many being made anymore. Right. It was probably the first Western that most of our crew had worked on, except maybe for Caballeros.
Yeah, at least American Western,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, that was actually, I was going to add on to that, was I remember the Charos that worked on our movie, all the horse guys, that helped us do all the cowboy stuff and all the animal work. Yeah, they didn't have a ton of other American films, at least, that they were coming off of, which I think was kind of exciting to a lot of the HODs and the crew members to be working on a film with people from the States and new people that they were working with, but not just on a super American movie, the way that a big franchise will come down and, suck in all the Mexican crew for a week to do their big budget movie and then leave. I felt a good amount of excitement of.
Yeah, we weren't shooting, like I can't remember 2 James Bonds ago that there was the huge opening sequence of the James Bond movies in Mexico City during Dia de los Muertos, and it's fabulous scene in the movie, but that's just a big Hollywood studio action movie that happens to be shot in Mexico during a famous Mexican holiday, and our movie is a little bit more like about Mexico.
It was a true co-production.
Yeah.
All the horse scenes were great, and the horse breaking, which is such a staple. I mean, that almost seems like you were like, we got to do a horse breaking scene. It's a Western, right? I don't know. Did you?
There are some things when you're doing a Western, it's like, we got to kind of do like that thing,
Yeah. It's funny that you said that, because I will definitely admit that was a later addition to the script. I went to see the film The Mustang, Ty Schoenert's film, I think, that came out 2 years ago maybe. And I remember in the middle of that movie, I had to watch the movie twice, because about halfway through I was sparked with some inspiration for that scene, and basically didn't pay attention to the rest of the film because I was thinking about the scene that I needed to write when I got home. But yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what Conor was saying, where we didn't really set out to make a Western on page one or day one of writing this movie. But then as we kept going, it was more and more of a true Western, and we tried to just run with it.
Yeah, and often when people make Westerns, it's especially maybe in the last, I don't know, even in the last 50 years, they're maybe always actually, it's like a story about America or in some way, like you're making a metaphor for America, but this is a Western in what, I mean, there was a great sequence of lines, I think, with the woman who's reading Huck Finn, right, where she's like, you're in America.
Yeah.
And then you were like, Texas, something about Texas, we're not in America, we're in Texas or whatever, and she's like, what does that mean? And you're like, I don't know. That was very powerful to me, because it was like, when a Western makes a statement about America, I don't know, what's your statement about America?
Yeah, I think, the cowboy does tend to stand for America. And I think it does too a lot of times. Hard work and grit, determination, doing it yourself with your bare hands. I mean, that's very American. And it was kind of how the frontier was won, or whatever, was through cowboying. And yeah, I mean, we certainly wanted to touch on that. But I mean, I think that moment in particular in the film is kind of going toward the attitude that we're all kind of made from our surroundings, but we don't necessarily know why.
And it's also, we draw these lines in the sand, right? And whether it's between states, like the line is, my dad says we're not from America, we're from Texas, and we're from Texas. You can always get a Texan to talk about Texas, and so he's got this idea in his mind. Oh, I'm from Texas. I'm from America. And you take pride in these things, and you should. But then at the same time, it's like, why? What does it really matter? Like, what does it really matter? This is a kid who never really got questioned that, and never questioned that before. And it's a moment of introspection where it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
What someone, Tyler here asks, what are some of your guys' favorite Westerns?
Well, I definitely have to give a shout out to the Western that I was named after, Silverado. I was named Jake because of Kevin Costner's character in that film, and rides a paint horse as Jackson does, and that was definitely on purpose. but the other way, I mean, we
Mine-
grew up watching Lonesome Dove a lot. That was
that was a good one.
that was
Something about that.
we were always watching Lonesome Dove, and that certainly played.
That's a mini series, though. He asked for a movie
Mhm.
specifically.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a
We
film
watched
to me.
it on the tapes, so
It
it
was a
felt
Yeah.
like
fun movie to me.
We have some costumes from Lonesome Dove in our collection, actually.
cool.
Nice.
Yeah, great. I mean, I was probably my favorite. If I just pull one, would be Unforgiven, because that movie is just sort of it's a Clint Eastwood movie. It's everything to me that a Western should be. I mean, I like even the other modern. Like we're both big Taylor Sheridan fans. If you're thinking, it's many from the past that are great, but the kind of revival of the brand with the other modern Westerns, even like No Country for Old Men is really cool. A great movie and very much a Western.
Yeah, No Country for Old Men. And there's also, you were talking earlier about doing a Western and a cowboy movie, but it's not really about America. It's about Mexico, you know? And I think to give Taylor Sheridan some love, he has this ability to make a Western that's all about Native Americans, you know, with Wind River. And like I would call that a Western, a modern Western, you know? But it's not just the normal, cowboys and Indians, if you will. And I think that's a cool new layer of cowboy that we're finding.
Another Lawrence asks, the late author Charles Bowden wrote about the border between Tucson, Arizona, and Sonora. And he had a character in one of his books very similar to the angry young man who wanted to kill your character in the church. Have you read any of his works?
I have not.
But I guess we just intuited similar angry young people. We spent a lot of time on that character because he was the one who is probably the most the character in the most danger of just being pegged as like, oh, he's a villain, he's evil, he's just a bad guy. And I told you earlier we wanted to make a movie, without classic villains, and he's bad. I mean, he's the antagonist of the movie in a way. But we tried to find the heart for him too, and sympathy for him as well. He's to make him feel real also, which I think.
No, yeah, I think that he came across like that. Came across. The actor did a great job, and you wrote him well. Yeah, I think he came as a definitely somebody caught up in some bad stuff. In the chat, someone's commenting that she could feel the challenge that George Lopez felt by looking Hispanic but struggling to speak Spanish because they were taught not to speak it. And she said a lot of baby boomers might have a similar kind of experience. So she said, "Well done." On that. That was an interesting character kind of scene when he's studying there.
Yeah, as like an introduction for him. Yeah. And he's obviously trying, like he's trying to learn Spanish, but just doesn't.
Yeah. To be a Border Patrol agent, you really have to straddle both sides of the border. And to do that as a Mexican American just adds this whole nother dilemma for you about, which side do you choose? And, and a lot of the research about Border Patrol agents as well is, there are definitely some guys that join the Border Patrol to kick ass, if you will. And then there's a lot of others that join it to save people's lives, even if that means getting people not to cross the border because it's so dangerous. I remember reading, I wish we could have found a way to get this into the movie, but about Border Patrol agents that had to like knife through we have a scene where we show kind of the hidden spot of the migrants where they hide their water and stuff like that for the cross. And if you find that as a Border Patrol agent, you're supposed to destroy it basically and knife through the water and stuff. And that's,
you could be killing somebody.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so malicious and everything, but you might also be saving someone's life if you make sure that they don't even try to cross, but you might also be killing them as well. It's tough.
That's a real moral dilemma to be in that kind of job.
Someone here also asked, do you guys speak Spanish? How's your Spanish?
His is better than mine.
Hablo poquito. It's not. Yeah, I think we got better at while we were there.
By the end of shooting, I felt really good about it, but
now it's gone.
The scary thing is you start thinking your Spanish is pretty good when you're talking with someone else whose Spanish isn't that good, and then you get to like actual Mexico, and try to have a conversation, and you're just left behind in like 30
Yeah.
seconds. But you know what? The truth is, like, if you make the effort, then we'll really
Halfway there.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
The expectations for Americans for language is just so low in other countries that if you make an effort, they're usually pretty appreciated.
Yeah.
It's true. That's all the questions that I had, and but I really wanted to thank you guys both. I mean, if there's anything else you wanted to share or anything, but I wanted to thank you so much for sharing with us and bringing this film into the world.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just really appreciative of getting to have the chance to chat with you, and for you and your audience and everyone at the museum to hopefully, you know, watch the movie and enjoy it and spread the message of it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to having all of you all come to the museum when we're able to reopen and explore the Western in another light. So
I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
all right. The Autry Museum of the American West thanks our members and supporters.